Welcome to this episode of the Business of Practice podcast, where we focus on the physical, financial, and human sides of equine veterinary medicine. In this episode, we're talking about veterinary ethics with Dr. Ernie Martinez. I'm Kim Brown, your host and the publisher of Equimanagement. The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you in 2022 by CareCredit. Martinez, DVM, MBA, graduated from Oklahoma State University's College of Veterinary Medicine in 2003. He completed an ambulatory internship at Hagyard Equine Medical Institute and became a field care associate in 2004 and a member of the practice in 2014. His focus includes emergency field medicine, herd health and wellness, neonatal foal care, mare and stallion reproduction, and equine dentistry. He currently oversees Hagyard's intern and extern student programs. Thank you, Dr. Martinez, for joining us today to talk about veterinary ethics.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here tonight. I'm glad to talk about ethics. It's a very important topic.
You really have a unique perspective for this topic, since not only have you been in practice for more than 2 decades, but you work with the next generation of equine veterinarians. And we are going to get into that in a minute. But first, why do you think ethics is such an important topic in today's equine veterinary practice?
Ethics is very important. It helps us enjoy and appreciate where we work. It helps us feel good about the work that we do. It helps us be a positive and impactful part of our community. And then, people want to work and be around people that are ethical, have a positive impact, positive energy, makes there's less stress, there's less things to worry about. People want to work with, hire, be around people with integrity and intelligence, and it's an important part of our service relationship with our clients, of having that relationship of trust and ethical behavior and ethical practices with our veterinary medicine.
And I know that you've been on several business talks during the AP conventions, and AP has made it a point to really try to focus on ethics because they said in their member survey that was important. So why do you think that ethics is so important to veterinarians today? Why does the AP make that a point?
I think in our industry, we can be kind of sometimes put in some difficult situations. And I think our membership has reached out for some education and training on those issues, and kind of maybe some talking through those scenarios and what to do and how to handle yourself in the situation so that you can remain an ethical practitioner, you can maintain that good standing in the profession and in your community. And so I think our memberships reached out looking for some guidance, looking for some training, kind of learning through different scenarios from practitioners that have been there with maybe a few decades of experience like myself. And so, having the conversation and talking about what to do, talking about what resources are available, where to go if you're faced with a challenge and if you have an issue. It's important to talk about things when things are calm before you're in those pressured situations, so you can react calmly and hopefully find the right answer to the situation.
I think that is such a great point, Dr. Martinez, a lot of people don't think about being put in any kind of an ethical dilemma, but it really happens almost on a day-to-day basis in some areas of the country where trainers may ask you to do something you're not comfortable with, or an owner asks you to put down a horse that you feel medically could be saved, or, there's so many other, billing of one client one way and one client a different way, how you deal with people in your practice. What do you think are some of the issues that the industry needs to address?
I think a lot of those, you touched on a bunch of them, and I think the main ones, kind of most to the forefront and most public nowadays are treatments and stuff at the tracks that give performance advantages or could possibly influence the outcome of races. There's several recent big ones of note, but I think just those things, those questions, those scenarios that may not only they compromise your ethics, but they may compromise the health and the care of a horse. And as a group, as an industry, we need to be doing everything the best we can to maintain a positive image to our public, to our clients, so that we can keep our industry going and we can, keep our profession, relevant and lively. And we have to address those situations and educate our membership on those situations beforehand. So hopefully they don't get put in too many uncomfortable situations.
Well, and we want to make sure that racing is not the only place that this happens. Every type of sport horse veterinarian has told me stories about things that have made them uncomfortable, that either clients have asked or situations they have come up on.
Yeah, and I think, in the sport horse industry and the show jumping industry, I think a lot of the main conflicts in those situations involve, pre-purchase exams when people are trying to sell a horse and they want to do their due diligence and have their horse vetted, and they want to ask the veterinarian that they know and trust to do the examination. And there's a lot of information and a lot of things that go into those decisions. And sometimes the veterinarians can be pressured by the parties on both sides of the equation to, potentially maybe not describe things one way or the other. And those are just difficult situations that, fortunately for me, I don't do a lot of show horse pre-purchase exams, but I know it's definitely a stressful situation for our doctors that do.
Yeah, and I think the AVMA PLIT recommends that veterinarians don't represent both the buyer and the seller, but occasionally you find yourself in that situation. So, that will happen, but that can be a very tenuous situation.
Yeah, I think, and a lot of veterinarians kind of work in different areas and they have multiple clients, and those clients are both in the sport and they may be trying to buy a horse from one another and you're their vet. And so you may get asked, and I think, it's good to be upfront about your relationships with both sides of the equation. And at times, might be best to refer or punt that scenario, that case, to a colleague, that you're not affiliated with or outside of your doctor group, just to do the horses right, do the clients right, and make the outcome a good outcome.
The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you by CareCredit. CareCredit keeps equine veterinarians at the heart of care by providing horse owners with simple, budget-friendly financing options. By bridging the gap between cost and care, CareCredit supports healthy financial relationships between veterinarians and their clients. It can help them move forward with care a horse needs whenever and wherever it's needed. It's really interesting to me that you are overseeing Hagyard's intern and extern student programs. And there's a lot of questions coming from the next generations about how the current ethics in equine veterinary practice are playing out. What are you hearing from these younger veterinarians and veterinarians to come? What are their concerns?
I think their concerns are being ready and prepared for the situations and knowing what to do and knowing who to go to. Hopefully that's a mentor or an HR department kind of manager at their clinic. I think they want everybody else in the industry and our business to be ethical practitioners as well, because that shines a good light on them and it makes their life easier. They don't have to answer questions from their family members who may tune into one or two races a year and ask you, hey, what about this guy, or what happened in that race? What's the big hubbub? How could that vet do that? You're a vet too. I think the young practitioners they're concerned about the public perception of their sport, of course, but they want to be prepared and ready for what they should do and what resources they have if they need to seek help on ethical issues.
And those are some really good points. And what do you think that you would recommend if a young veterinarian came up and had a concern, whether it was a real or perceived ethical dilemma? What are the steps you would recommend that young veterinarian to take?
I would recommend to them to talk to their mentors or their senior clinicians at their practice that may have already had some dealings with the client. They may be aware of some backstory and some history that goes along with it. They may have been in the same position themselves and could give some advice. And they would also hopefully be aware of the other ethical resources that the AEP provides to their membership. And I think that's where I would start. And I would expect, those colleagues, those mentors to support and back, that young doctor if they have to say, if they're driven or their value system draws them to say, I can't do that. That's, not within my ethical, moral compass. I don't want to do that. Regardless of the impact that it would have on the practice's bottom line, that they would be supported by those senior clinicians, and that might be a good opportunity to have a conversation with the client and that senior doctor about the situation. And it may be just a point of educating the client or the manager maybe that they're dealing with about why procedure X, Y, and Z is a bad idea, or why we shouldn't do one thing, and maybe there's another alternative that they just weren't aware of, didn't think of, and go from there. But I would kind of recommend, talk to your mentors, talk to your senior clinicians, talk to maybe it's your new and out of school, maybe it's your mentor, your advisor back in vet school, and say, I got this situation, I don't know what to do, what do you recommend? And that hopefully the years of experience of that senior clinician can guide them to the right answer or resource, or, at least a good start is always the AEP website with the ethics and the different ethical resources that they have there on the page. It's pretty easy to find.
Okay, and we'll make sure and put a link to that. And if you go to the equimanagement.com article that will go along with this podcast, we'll make sure to link the section that Dr. Martinez talked about on the AEP website, so it'll be easy to find if you need to. So I guess the other thing is that I would like to talk about is within a clinic, because we've mostly been talking about clients and pre-purchase and things outside the clinic. What if someone feels that there is an ethical dilemma within a clinic? Is there a good way to handle that?
Yeah, that could be challenging, and that might depend on the size and the resources and maybe the model structure of that clinic. I would kind of recommend too to the clinics out there and the people that are working on, the onboarding programs for new doctors is to kind of talk about ethics at the beginning and talk about the resources that hospital or that practice has available. Hopefully they don't need to use them, but it's good to talk about them, like I said, when there's not a stressful situation. And then so if there's a clinical ethical issue or inter-doctor issue going on, if there's an HR department or an HR manager, I'd start with them to kind of use them as a somewhat neutral person to kind of discuss the situation with. If there's hopefully a senior clinic owner that is not involved in what's going on, that it sounds like it'd be one of those situations where I'd go right to the top and explain the situation. And again, I'd hope that's the place where that senior doctor or owner would be the right mentor for that situation to listen objectively and take all the information in, and then somewhat hopefully relieve that doctor from the issue, and then go and do some investigating of their own to find out what the situation is and what the right resolution is. So like I said, make it part of your early discussions with your onboarding programs for new doctors, interns, new grads, associates, whomever. Point out the resources that you have available on site. Hopefully that's an AR director or practice manager even. And then, there's the AEP Committee on Ethics. They've got some great members, great leaders there for some advice. You can put my email on the podcast and you can give me a call, and I'd be glad to help or glad to offer an ear to listen and hopefully guide them in the right direction.
And I've a couple of times the situations I've heard about, it's been more of it turns out to be a miscommunication rather than an actual ethical issue. And so I'm glad you talked about going and getting it, talking about it right away. Don't let it stew. Go address it with the proper people at the practice, or if not possible, with a mentor or someone else, because sometimes situations can be taken out of context. And so you want to make sure that, is this really an ethical situation, or is it something that's just a poor communication situation?
Right. Hopefully in that, that discussion, you can both kind of look at it from everybody's point of view and make sure you're seeing the situation right. Like you said, make sure that it's really an ethical issue. And if it is, hopefully that senior leader, mentor at the practice can help get it resolved in whatever situation that might be. There's a lot of scenarios we could talk about, but I think, those are the basic premises: is talk to the main people at the practice and go from there. Make sure you understand the issue, make sure it's really an issue. And not to be afraid to speak up when your ethics and your personal values are challenged, because it might not be just you. It may be something that's been going on and there's others. So that's what I would do. I would start up the top with the manager or with an HR kind of manager, or department head, or practice manager, and talk it out and make sure that it's an issue.
Okay. And is there anything else that, while you've been making presentations at AAP or working with some of these young veterinarians, that you would also like to talk about as far as veterinary ethics today?
I think it's really important to just talk about it with your teams before there's an issue, before there's a case. Talk about it so everybody knows, like I said, what resources are available and where they should go. And it's an important part of that culture, because it builds positive goodwill within the practice, within the community. And I just can't say that enough.
And those are great points. So, well, thank you, Dr. Martinez, for joining us today for the Business Practice Podcast. And a big thanks to our sponsor, CareCredit, for letting us have these discussions. And we invite our listeners to visit equimanagement.com to listen to every episode, or you can go to your favorite podcast network. And if you have any questions or suggestions, you can send an email to me at kbrown, that's the letter K Brown, at equinenetwork.com. The Business of Practice Podcast is a production of the Equine Podcast Network, an entity of the Equine Network, LLC.